Imagine for a moment a world fundamentally unlike our own, a vast and ancient landscape where the familiar rules of scale seem to have been dramatically rewritten. Close your eyes and picture a dragonfly, not the small shimmering jewels we see flitting over ponds today, but a creature of truly immense proportions, its delicate, veined wings stretching wider than your outstretched arm, perhaps even approaching the wingspan of a modern-day hawk. Now, envision a millipede, not the coiled, finger-length invertebrates that scurry across garden paths, but a segmented behemoth, its armored body longer than a small car, perhaps 2 meters from head to tail, slowly, deliberately, navigating a forest floor shrouded in perpetual mist. This was not a scene from a fantasy novel or a distant alien planet, but a very real chapter in Earth's deep history, a time when insects, the often overlooked inhabitants of our modern world, truly ruled by size. This extraordinary epoch, known as the Carboniferous period, unfolded roughly 359 to 299 million years ago. To put that into perspective, it was a time long before the dinosaurs first emerged, and even further removed from the appearance of the first mammals, or indeed humanity. Our planet then was a vastly different place, a humid, misty realm, dominated by immense, swampy forests that stretched across vast continental landmasses. The air itself was thick, warm, and laden with moisture, creating an atmosphere that would feel both alien and intensely alive to anyone transported there from our present day. It was a world that, in almost every conceivable way, fostered life on a scale that now seems almost impossible, particularly for creatures we typically associate with smallness. Let's take a deeper look at what it might have been like to step into this ancient, verdant landscape. The ground beneath your feet would likely be soft, a thick carpet of decaying plant matter and damp soil, squelching with every step. Towering above you would be species of plants that, while distantly related to today's ferns and horsetails, bore little resemblance in their magnificent stature. Giant club mosses, like Lepidodendron and Sigillaria, would reach heights of 30 to 40 meters, their bark covered in diamond-shaped patterns where old leaves had fallen, forming vast, imposing columns that pierced the misty canopy. Beneath them, colossal tree ferns unfurled fronds many meters long, creating a dense, multi-layered undergrowth that would be almost impenetrable. The light filtering through this immense green ceiling would be diffused, a perpetual twilight even at midday, painting the entire scene in hues of deep emerald, olive, and mossy browns. The air itself, a critical component of this ancient environment, would feel heavy on your skin. Imagine the sensation of walking through a tropical rainforest after a heavy downpour, but magnified. A constant, almost palpable humidity that permeates everything. The warmth would be ever present, a consistent subtropical heat that encouraged rampant plant growth. And the sounds, they would be unlike anything heard in a modern forest. Instead of chirping birds or the rustling of large mammals, you might hear the incessant hum of countless smaller insects, the distant splash of a creature moving through a stagnant pool, or perhaps the low rhythmic scuttle of something truly enormous navigating the dense undergrowth. The dominant smells would be those of damp earth, rich decaying vegetation, and the sweet, almost cloying scent of primordial plant life, all mingling in a potent, earthy perfume. This setting, so rich in moisture and plant life, created the perfect conditions for life to take on truly astonishing proportions. We are accustomed to thinking of insects as small, delicate creatures, often overlooked, or perhaps seen as pests. their intricate anatomy, their segmented bodies, their exoskeletons, and their unique ways of breathing all seem to inherently limit their potential size. Yet, during the Carboniferous, these very same biological blueprints gave rise to forms that defy our modern expectations. It's a captivating paradox. How did creatures constrained by what appears to be an inherent biological ceiling manage to become so utterly colossal? Consider the sheer difference in scale. A typical modern dragonfly has a wingspan of about 5 to 10 centimeters. The giant dragonflies of the Carboniferous, known as Meganeura, boasted wingspans that could reach up to 70 centimeters, nearly 3 times the length of an adult human forearm. That's a creature capable of casting a significant shadow as it soared overhead, a true aerial predator of immense power. Similarly, modern millipedes rarely exceed 30 centimeters in length. Most are far smaller. Arthropleura, the giant millipede of this ancient age, could grow to 2 meters in length, making it one of the largest land invertebrates to have ever existed. Its segmented body, composed of many hardened plates, would have been a formidable sight, resembling a living armored train slowly traversing the forest floor. Even spiders and scorpions, fearsome enough in their current forms, would have been significantly larger, their legs spanning lengths that would make any modern arachnophobe recoil in disbelief. This dramatic difference in size between the insects of the past and those of today presents a fundamental question. What changed? What unique conditions allowed these invertebrates to shed the constraints that seem to govern their modern relatives? Why, for millions of years, did evolution push insects towards gigantism, only to eventually reverse course, leaving us with the comparatively diminutive forms we know today? It's a question that delves deep into the interplay of atmospheric chemistry, the fundamental mechanics of respiration, and the relentless pressures of evolution. The very air these giants breathed, its composition and density, played a far more crucial role than one might initially suspect. Our modern atmosphere, while seemingly stable, has undergone profound shifts throughout Earth's history. The gases that envelop our planet today are not the same gases that sustained life hundreds of millions of years ago. And for insects, whose physiology is intimately linked to the properties of the air, these changes were not merely academic, they were fundamental determinants of survival and, crucially, of size. The simple elegance of their respiratory systems, while efficient for smaller bodies, presented a unique challenge when scaled up. So, as we imagine ourselves standing in that ancient misty forest, surrounded by towering unfamiliar plants and the unseen presence of colossal invertebrates, we are faced with a profound biological puzzle. How did the world transform from one where an insect could grow to the size of a small crocodile into the world we know, where such a thing is utterly impossible? The answer, as we will discover, lies not in some fantastical magic, but in a delicate and powerful balance of environmental factors, with one invisible gas holding the key to unlocking the true potential of these ancient giants. This journey into the Carboniferous period is a journey into Earth's past, a testament to the incredible adaptability of life, and a vivid demonstration of how profoundly the very breath of our planet can shape the creatures that call it home. It's a story of a time when oxygen truly ruled the air, and in doing so, allowed insects to rule by sheer breathtaking size. We've journeyed into a distant past, where the very scale of life seems to defy our modern understanding. We've walked through the misty, warm, ancient forests, glimpsing the shadows of colossal invertebrates. But how, you might wonder, did such creatures exist? What secret allowed a dragonfly to span nearly a meter, or a millipede to stretch longer than an adult human? The answer, surprisingly, was hidden in plain sight, or rather, in the very air these giants breathed. The secret to their astounding size lies in the invisible, life-giving gas we call oxygen. Imagine, for a moment, the air around you right now. It feels light, almost imperceptible, yet it sustains every breath you take. In our modern world, the atmosphere is composed of roughly 21% oxygen. This percentage is stable, a finely tuned balance that allows current life forms, including ourselves, to thrive. But step back in time, hundreds of millions of years to the Carboniferous period, and the atmospheric composition tells a vastly different story. During that epoch, the air was extraordinarily rich in oxygen, with levels estimated to have reached as high as 35%. This wasn't just a slight increase, it was a profound difference, a fundamental shift in the very fabric of the atmosphere, and it was the singular enabler of insect gigantism. To understand why this elevated oxygen level was so crucial, we need to take a closer look at how insects breathe. Unlike mammals, birds, or reptiles, which possess complex lungs and circulatory systems to actively pump oxygen into their blood and distribute it throughout their bodies, insects employ a much simpler, yet highly effective, respiratory system. This system consists of a network of tiny branching tubes called tracheae. These tracheae open to the outside world through small pores on the insect's body called spiracles. From these spiracles, the tubes extend inward, ramifying into finer and finer branches, eventually reaching almost every cell in the insect's body. The primary mechanism by which oxygen moves through this tracheal system is called passive diffusion. Picture a drop of ink falling into a glass of still water. Slowly, without any active stirring, the ink molecules spread out until they are evenly distributed throughout the water. This is diffusion. Molecules moving from an area where they are highly concentrated to an area where they are less concentrated, simply by their random motion. For an insect, oxygen from the outside air, which is highly concentrated, diffuses into the tracheal tubes, where its concentration is lower due to cellular respiration. It then continues to diffuse deeper into the body, reaching individual cells. Now, here's the critical point. The efficiency of passive diffusion is heavily dependent on the concentration gradient and the distance it needs to travel. The steeper the concentration gradient, meaning the bigger the difference between oxygen levels outside and inside the body, the faster and more effectively oxygen will diffuse. However, diffusion also becomes dramatically less efficient over longer distances. It works well for small creatures, where no cell is very far from an oxygen supply. But for a larger body, the interior cells would simply starve for oxygen if diffusion were the only mechanism. This inherent limitation of the tracheal system is precisely why modern insects are relatively small. In our current 21% oxygen atmosphere, a truly gigantic insect simply couldn't get enough oxygen to its innermost tissues through passive diffusion alone. The oxygen wouldn't be able to penetrate deeply enough, quickly enough, to sustain the metabolic demands of a large body. Imagine trying to breathe through a very long, very narrow straw. The effort would become immense, and eventually, the supply would be insufficient. The size of an insect today is, in many ways, a direct reflection of the oxygen levels in the air. But in the Carboniferous period, with oxygen levels soaring up to 35%, this limitation was largely overcome. With such an abundance of oxygen in the atmosphere, the concentration gradient was significantly steeper. This meant that oxygen molecules were, in essence, pushed into the tracheal system with much greater force and permeated further into the insect's body. Even though the mechanism was still passive diffusion, the sheer volume and higher partial pressure of oxygen allowed it to reach the inner cells of much larger bodies effectively. It was like having an incredibly powerful, unseen fan, constantly blowing oxygen into every available opening, ensuring even the most distant cells received their vital supply. Consider the immense energy requirements of a creature like Meganeura, the giant dragonfly. To power its enormous wings, which could span up to 70 centimeters, it would have needed robust flight muscles, demanding a constant and substantial supply of oxygen for respiration. In a lower oxygen environment, these muscles would quickly fatigue, unable to generate enough power for sustained flight. But in the oxygen-rich carboniferous air, its tracheal system, despite its reliance on diffusion, could deliver the necessary oxygen, fueling its powerful flight and enabling it to dominate the ancient skies as a formidable aerial predator. Similarly, Arthropleura, the 2-meter-long millipede, lumbering through the dense undergrowth, would have had an immense body mass to support and move. Its countless segments and legs would have been metabolically demanding, requiring a vast network of oxygen-delivering tracheae. The heightened atmospheric oxygen made it possible for oxygen to reach every part of its colossal, segmented body, allowing it to grow to a size that is utterly unimaginable for a millipede today. The same principle would have applied to the giant spiders and scorpions of the era, enabling them to achieve sizes that would cause modern arachnophobes to truly tremble. It wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving. Higher oxygen levels likely translated to more efficient metabolism for these creatures. With an easier and more abundant supply of oxygen, their cells could convert nutrients into energy more effectively, powering larger bodies, faster movements, and perhaps even contributing to longer lifespans. The very air they breathed imbued them with an almost supernatural vigor, allowing them to push the boundaries of invertebrate size far beyond anything we witness in the modern world. So, the mystery of the Carboniferous giants begins to unravel. It wasn't some magical evolutionary quirk, but a direct fundamental consequence of Earth's atmospheric chemistry. The invisible gas, oxygen, transformed from a limiting factor for invertebrate size into an enabler of unprecedented gigantism. The air was literally thicker with life-sustaining oxygen, providing a unique environmental window for insects to evolve into forms that would be utterly impossible to sustain in today's world. This atmospheric abundance was the cornerstone of their reign, allowing their simple yet effective respiratory systems to support bodies that would otherwise suffocate. The Carboniferous period thus stands as a vivid testament to how profoundly environmental conditions, even something as seemingly mundane as the air we breathe, can shape the trajectory of life on Earth. Having explored the invisible force of oxygen that permitted such incredible growth, let us now step closer and encounter the living, breathing titans that once dominated the Carboniferous landscape. Imagine standing amidst those towering, ancient forests, the air thick with humidity and the scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation. The sounds around you would be unfamiliar. The constant rustle of enormous leaves, the drip of moisture from the canopy, and perhaps the buzzing of wings far larger than any you know today. This was a world where invertebrates, creatures without backbones, ascended to truly astounding sizes, reshaping the very fabric of the ecosystem. Among the most breathtaking of these ancient giants was a creature known as Meganeura, often described as a dragonfly-like insect, though technically it belonged to an extinct order of insects called Meganisoptera. Picture, if you can, a dragonfly with a wingspan stretching up to 70 centimeters, nearly 2.5 feet across. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the length of a small guitar, or the average width of a human torso. Envision this magnificent insect, with its 4 delicate veined wings, translucent and shimmering, propelling it through the misty air with powerful, rhythmic beats. The sound of its flight would have been a deep, resonant hum, a constant presence above the swampy clearings and open waterways. Meganeura was not merely large. It was a formidable aerial predator, a true master of the Carboniferous skies. Its large, multifaceted eyes, similar to those of modern dragonflies, would have granted it nearly 360-degree vision, an invaluable asset for spotting prey and avoiding larger emerging predators. Its strong, spiny legs were perfectly adapted for snatching smaller insects and even early amphibians directly from the air or from the water's surface. With its immense wings and robust body, Meganeura would have been incredibly agile, capable of darting, hovering, and accelerating with an efficiency that made it a terror to anything smaller in the air. Its presence would have cast fleeting, enormous shadows over the damp undergrowth, a silent herald of its predatory patrol. The sheer scale of this creature would have been awe-inspiring, a living testament to the biological possibilities unlocked by the planet's unique atmospheric conditions. While Meganeura ruled the air, the forest floor was the domain of an even more colossal creature, Arthropleura. This was a giant millipede, a segmented marvel of the ancient world, whose fossilized tracks reveal a truly staggering size. Imagine a creature that could reach lengths of 2 meters, roughly the size of a small car, or a mature human standing upright. Its body was a series of numerous hard, shell-like segments, each bearing multiple pairs of legs, allowing it to move with a slow, deliberate, yet unstoppable progress across the terrain. The sheer mass of Arthropleura would have meant that its passage through the dense undergrowth created audible rustling and slight tremors in the soft, damp ground. Arthropleura's diet is a subject of scientific debate, but the prevailing view, supported by fossil evidence and comparisons with modern millipedes, suggests it was primarily a herbivore or detritivore. This means it likely fed on decaying plant matter, fungi, and possibly spores and soft vegetation, playing a crucial role in breaking down the vast amounts of organic material accumulating on the Carboniferous forest floor. Its powerful mandibles would have been well suited for grinding tough plant fibers. Picture this immense segmented creature, slowly but surely consuming its way through fallen leaves and ancient logs, its many legs working in rhythmic waves to propel its massive body forward. Its coloration might have been a blend of earthy tones, browns, and greens, allowing it to camouflage among the dense vegetation of its swampy habitat, a living, breathing part of the ancient ecosystem's decomposition cycle. The sight of an Arthropleura emerging from the shadows of the ferns would have been both wondrous and perhaps a little unsettling, a reminder of the raw, untamed scale of life in this bygone era. But the giants of the Carboniferous were not limited to just these 2 awe-inspiring examples. Even the more familiar inhabitants of the invertebrate world, such as spiders and scorpions, achieved sizes that would dwarf their modern descendants. Imagine a spider, not the size of your thumb, but with a body the size of your palm and a leg span that could cover a dinner plate. These ancient arachnids would have been formidable ambush predators, lurking in crevices, under fallen logs, or amidst the dense foliage, waiting for smaller insects or even juvenile amphibians to stumble into their path. Their fangs would have been proportionally larger, capable of delivering potent venom to subdue their prey. And then there were the scorpions, even more fearsome in their ancient incarnation. Imagine a scorpion, not just a few inches long, but one whose body alone stretched to 30 or even 50 centimeters, with powerful claw-like pincers that could crush small prey, and a segmented tail arcing over its back, tipped with a venomous stinger. These colossal scorpions would have been nocturnal hunters, emerging from their hiding places in the damp soil or under rocks to stalk the forest floor. The thought of encountering such a creature in the dim, misty light of the Carboniferous swamps adds another layer to the alien nature of this ancient world, a constant reminder of the formidable forces at play. This entire ecosystem, dominated by these giant arthropods, truly represented an alien landscape. The air, rich with oxygen, allowed these creatures to grow to sizes that are simply not sustainable for their modern counterparts. The dense, humid forest provided an endless supply of food for herbivores like Arthropleura, which in turn provided a vast energy base for predators like Meganeura, giant spiders, and scorpions. The sheer scale of life was amplified, creating a food web where every niche was occupied by a creature of exceptional size. The rustling of countless legs, the incessant hum of enormous wings, the earthy aroma of decomposition, and the distant calls of early amphibians would have painted a vivid sensory picture of a world where invertebrates truly ruled by sheer scale. These giants, from the soaring Meganeura to the lumbering Arthropleura, were not just anomalies. They were the very embodiment of an Earth where oxygen levels unlocked a biological potential that remains unparalleled in the history of insect life. Their existence provides a powerful, tangible link between the atmosphere and the evolution of life, demonstrating just how profoundly environmental conditions can sculpt the living world. The extraordinary abundance of oxygen that permitted the reign of giant insects was far from a random stroke of luck or a cosmic anomaly. Instead, it was a direct and profound consequence of Earth's unique geological and biological conditions during the Carboniferous period itself. Imagine our planet not as a static backdrop, but as a colossal, living engine, meticulously calibrated over millions of years to produce an atmosphere unlike any other in its long history. This engine was powered by life, specifically by the relentless growth and eventual burial of vast, ancient forests. To truly understand this atmospheric transformation, we must first immerse ourselves in the Carboniferous landscape. Picture a world dominated by immense, low-lying swamp forests that stretched for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers across the continental landmasses. These were not the forests we know today, filled with flowering trees and deciduous leaves. Instead, they were verdant cathedrals built from primitive, yet incredibly vigorous, plant life. Towering above all else were the lycopsids, often referred to as scale trees, due to the diamond-shaped patterns left on their bark by shed leaves. These included genera like Lepidodendron and Sigillaria, which could soar to heights of 30 to 50 meters, their unbranched trunks rising like ancient columns before branching into crowns of slender strap-like leaves at their very tops. Beneath their majestic canopy, giant horsetails, such as calamites, formed dense thickets, their segmented bamboo-like stems reaching 10 to 20 meters high, creating an intricate, almost impenetrable understory. Their hollow stems would rustle with a dry, whispering sound as the humid air stirred them, Interspersed throughout this green labyrinth were enormous ferns, some with fronds several meters long, unfurling in vast verdant spirals, creating a soft, spongy layer on the forest floor, often partially submerged in shallow, murky water. The air was perpetually thick with humidity, a constant mist clinging to the foliage, and the light that filtered through the dense canopy was diffused, giving the entire landscape an ethereal, almost otherworldly glow. The ground underfoot would have been soft, a squelching mixture of rich, dark mud and decaying plant matter, saturated with water. The pervasive scent would have been one of damp earth, rich humus, and the slightly pungent aroma of rapidly growing vegetation. This immense biomass, these endless forests, were engaged in one of life's most fundamental processes, photosynthesis. Let's briefly recall what this means. Photosynthesis is the incredible biochemical alchemy by which plants, using the energy from sunlight, convert water absorbed from the soil and carbon dioxide drawn from the atmosphere into sugars, which are their food and building blocks, and crucially, oxygen, which is released as a byproduct. In the Carboniferous, these vast forests were like an enormous global factory, operating at peak efficiency. Every single leaf, every frond, every green stem was tirelessly pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and exhaling vast quantities of oxygen. Over millions of years, this continuous, relentless process gradually but dramatically shifted the composition of Earth's atmosphere. The sheer volume of plant material meant an unprecedented rate of oxygen production, far exceeding the rates seen in most other geological periods. Simply put, the greater the number of photosynthesizing plants, the more oxygen is churned out into the air. But producing oxygen is only half the story. In most modern ecosystems, when plants and other organisms die, their organic matter is broken down by decomposers, primarily bacteria and fungi. This process of decay consumes oxygen and releases carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, completing a natural cycle. But in the Carboniferous, a critical imbalance occurred, tipping the scales heavily in favor of oxygen accumulation. The very conditions that fostered such lush plant growth also inhibited the complete decomposition of dead organic material. The primary reason for this arrested decay was the pervasive waterlogged environment. The Carboniferous period was characterized by extensive low-lying coastal plains and vast interior swamps. When plants died and fell into these anoxic or oxygen-depleted waters, they were largely protected from the aerobic bacteria and fungi that typically break down organic matter. Without oxygen, these decomposers cannot thrive, and their metabolic processes, which would normally return carbon dioxide to the air, are severely curtailed. Imagine a fallen lepidodendron trunk, perhaps 40 meters long, slowly sinking into the dark, stagnant water of a Carboniferous swamp. Instead of rotting away quickly, it would slowly become waterlogged and preserved, gradually becoming buried under layers of sediment and newer plant debris. The silence in these deep, mucky parts of the swamp would have been profound, broken only by the occasional plop of a falling leaf, or the distant croak of an amphibian, a stark contrast to the buzzing life above. Another significant factor contributing to this lack of decay was the comparatively primitive state of decomposers themselves. While fungi and bacteria existed, the highly specialized lignin-degrading fungi, which are incredibly efficient at breaking down lignin, the tough, complex polymer that gives plants their structural rigidity, especially in woody stems, were either not yet widespread or had not evolved to the same degree of efficiency as their modern counterparts. Lignin is particularly resistant to decay, and without highly effective decomposers, vast quantities of woody material simply accumulated. This meant that the carbon locked within the sturdy trunks and branches of the Carboniferous trees remained trapped, rather than being released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Over immense stretches of time, this undegraded organic matter accumulated layer upon layer. Year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium, fallen trees, leaves, and other plant debris built up in thick spongy deposits known as peat. As these peat layers grew deeper, the weight of overlying material, combined with the slow but relentless geological processes of burial and compaction, began a remarkable transformation. Over millions of years, the peat was compressed and heated, gradually undergoing a process called coalification. First, it would transform into lignite, a soft brown coal. With increasing pressure and temperature, it would then become subbituminous coal, followed by bituminous coal, and finally, in some cases, the hard, black, energy-rich anthracite. The vast majority of the world's economically significant coal deposits, the very fuel that powered the Industrial Revolution, were formed during this relatively brief geological window, specifically in the Carboniferous and early Permian periods. This monumental burial of organic carbon was not merely an interesting geological phenomenon. It was the mechanism that profoundly reshaped Earth's atmosphere. By burying vast quantities of carbon in the form of coal, the Carboniferous Earth was effectively removing enormous amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it away in the planet's crust. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and while it plays a vital role in regulating Earth's temperature, its removal had a profound effect on the atmospheric balance. As carbon dioxide levels plummeted from an estimated 1,500 to 2,000 parts per million ppm, at the beginning of the Carboniferous, to perhaps as low as 300 to 400 ppm by the end, the inverse happened with oxygen. The oxygen that was being continuously produced by photosynthesis, instead of being consumed by decay, accumulated in the atmosphere. This led to the anomalously high oxygen concentrations reaching levels as high as 35%. Compared to the approximately 21% we experience today, this was a sustained atmospheric enrichment, not a fleeting event, continuing for tens of millions of years. The Carboniferous world was, therefore, a self-sustaining engine perfectly tuned to create and maintain an oxygen-rich atmosphere. It was a warm, wet, and incredibly fertile world. Global temperatures were generally higher than today, fostering rapid plant growth over wide geographical areas, even in regions that might now be considered temperate. Abundant rainfall fed the sprawling river systems and kept the vast swamps perpetually waterlogged, ensuring the conditions for carbon burial persisted. The land, still relatively young in terms of complex terrestrial ecosystems, was exceptionally fertile, perhaps enriched by volcanic activity or nutrient-rich sediments, providing the perfect substrate for these pioneering plant communities to explode in diversity and biomass. This combination of factors, lush, carbon-fixing vegetation, widespread anoxic conditions preventing decay, and the subsequent burial of organic carbon, created a positive feedback loop. More plants meant more oxygen. More swamps meant less decay. Less decay meant more carbon burial. More carbon burial meant less carbon dioxide, and even more oxygen. It was a grand planetary-scale experiment in atmospheric engineering, conducted by life itself, inadvertently setting the stage for the age of giants. This continuous process of photosynthesis and carbon burial transformed the very air these ancient creatures breathed. the atmosphere became a denser, richer medium, saturated with the life-giving gas. It was this profound environmental shift, rather than any internal biological innovation in the insects themselves, that truly unlocked their potential for colossal size. Without this verdant engine, without the relentless work of countless ancient trees and ferns, the skies would not have hummed with the colossal wings of Meganeura, nor would the forest floor have trembled under the segmented body of Arthropleura. The Earth's geology and biology conspired over eons to create a fleeting window in time where oxygen, the breath of life, quite literally ruled the air, paving the way for the most magnificent invertebrates our planet has ever known. The reign of giant insects, an era of unparalleled scale for invertebrates, was not destined to endure indefinitely. Just as the conditions on Earth had aligned to create this unique period, so too did they gradually shift, ushering in new challenges that would ultimately bring the age of colossal arthropods to a close. Over millions of years, the very atmosphere that had fueled their growth began to change, and simultaneously, more evolutionarily advanced competitors emerged from the shadows of the ancient forests, ready to claim their place in a transforming world. The extraordinary oxygen levels that defined the Carboniferous period, peaking at an astonishing 35%, were a product of specific geological and biological circumstances. But Earth is a planet of constant, albeit slow, change. The vast, humid swamp forests that had acted as a colossal oxygen factory and carbon sink began to recede. Continental plates, driven by the planet's internal heat, continued their slow, inexorable dance. Mountains rose, altering global wind patterns and ocean currents, leading to significant climatic shifts. Regions that were once perpetually warm and wet gradually became cooler and drier. These environmental changes directly impacted the sprawling, anoxic swamps, where so much plant matter had been buried, preventing its decay and locking away carbon. One of the most significant, yet often overlooked factors in the decline of atmospheric oxygen was the evolution of more efficient decomposers. For tens of millions of years, the complex organic compounds in the sturdy cell walls of plants, particularly lignin, which gives wood its rigidity, were difficult for early fungi and bacteria to break down completely. This inefficiency was a major reason why vast quantities of dead plant material accumulated, forming thick layers of peat that eventually transformed into the immense coal deposits we mine today. This process, known as carbon burial, effectively removed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and allowed oxygen to build up. However, over time, new lineages of fungi and bacteria evolved the biochemical machinery, specific enzymes, to efficiently decompose lignin. As these super decomposers spread through the ancient ecosystems, less and less organic matter escaped decay. Instead of being locked away underground, more carbon was released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide when plants died and decomposed. This reduction in the rate of carbon burial meant that the great oxygen pump of the Carboniferous began to slow down. The consequence was a gradual but sustained reduction in atmospheric oxygen. From its peak of around 35%, oxygen levels slowly but steadily declined, eventually settling closer to modern levels, perhaps around 20–25%. By the end of the Permian period that followed the Carboniferous, this wasn't a sudden drop, but a long, drawn-out exhalation by the planet, taking place over tens of millions of years. Imagine, if you can, the very air slowly thinning over countless generations, imperceptibly at first, but cumulatively profound for creatures whose very existence was tied to its richness. For the giant insects, This change presented an existential crisis. Their respiratory system, based on a network of tracheal tubes and passive diffusion, was a marvel of biological engineering for its time, perfectly suited to a high-oxygen world. But it was inherently inefficient for very large bodies in lower oxygen concentrations. As the air grew thinner, the concentration gradient that drove oxygen into their vast bodies weakened. A meganeura, once effortlessly soaring through the humid air with its 70-centimeter wingspan, would find itself struggling to fuel its powerful flight muscles. Each beat of its immense wings would demand more effort, more metabolic energy, for a diminishing return. Its once unrivaled agility in pursuit of prey would wane, its reaction times perhaps slowing. The vibrant hum of its wings might become a more labored drone. Its very size, once an advantage, was now a burden, demanding an oxygen supply that the thinning atmosphere could no longer readily provide. Similarly, Arthropleura, the colossal 2-meter-long millipede, would face immense challenges. Its vast, segmented body, with its countless internal organs and muscles, required a constant, abundant supply of oxygen. As oxygen levels declined, its internal tissues would experience increasing oxygen deprivation. Its slow, deliberate movement through the undergrowth would become even more sluggish, its growth rate potentially stunted, its overall energy levels significantly reduced. The effort required simply to move its massive bulk would leave less energy for foraging or reproduction. Imagine the sheer metabolic strain on such an enormous creature as the very air it breathed became less life-giving. These giants, once thriving, were now operating at the very edge of their physiological limits, becoming increasingly vulnerable. But the declining oxygen was only half of the story. While the giant invertebrates were struggling to adapt, a new class of predators was rising: the early reptiles. These creatures had evolved from amphibians, which were themselves the first vertebrates to venture onto land. Amphibians, however, were still tied to water for reproduction, laying jelly-covered eggs, and often relied on moist skin for respiration. Reptiles, on the other hand, represented a significant evolutionary leap, perfectly suited for a drier, less oxygen-rich world. The key innovation that propelled reptiles to dominance was the amniotic egg. Unlike amphibian eggs, the amniotic egg had a tough, protective shell and a series of internal membranes that encased the developing embryo in its own private aquatic environment. This freed reptiles from the need to lay their eggs in water, allowing them to colonize vast, drier terrestrial environments previously inaccessible to amphibians and less amenable to the humid swamp-dwelling giant insects. This was a profound freedom, opening up entirely new ecological niches. Beyond reproduction, reptiles also possessed a more efficient respiratory system: lungs. While insects relied on a passive tracheal system, lungs are active pumps. They can powerfully draw air in, expanding to increase the surface area for gas exchange, and then expel spent air. This active muscular pumping mechanism allowed reptiles to extract oxygen far more efficiently from the atmosphere, even when oxygen concentrations were lower. It was like upgrading from a simple open window to a sophisticated ventilation system. This meant that as oxygen levels declined, reptiles were far less impacted than their colossal invertebrate counterparts. They could maintain high metabolic rates, sustain active lifestyles, and grow to significant sizes without being limited by atmospheric oxygen. These early reptiles were also developing stronger, more robust skeletons and more agile limbs that were tucked further underneath their bodies, allowing for more efficient movement on land. Their skin became scaly and drier, reducing water loss and further enabling them to thrive away from the perpetual dampness of the Carboniferous swamps. They were becoming increasingly sophisticated predators, faster, more intelligent, with sharper senses and powerful jaws. Imagine a creature like Dimetrodon, an early synapsid often referred to as a mammal-like reptile, which could grow up to 3.5 meters long with its distinctive sail-like fin on its back, likely aiding in thermoregulation. While Dimetrodon itself lived slightly later, in the Permian, it represents the trend of increasingly large, active, and efficient vertebrate predators that emerged in this transitional period. The stage was set for a dramatic ecological shift. A meganeura, once the undisputed aerial hunter, would now find itself challenged by agile, lung-breathing proto-reptiles that could operate effectively in the thinning air. Its slower flight and reduced stamina made it a more vulnerable target. An Arthropleura, once too massive for most terrestrial threats, would now face a new generation of predators with powerful jaws and the sustained energy to overcome its defenses. These reptiles would prey on the giant insects themselves, their larvae, or compete directly for resources. The ecological balance, once tipped in favor of the oxygen-enabled giants, began to swing towards these new, more adaptable vertebrates. This was not a sudden, cataclysmic event, but a slow, relentless pressure exerted over millions of years. The environmental changes, declining oxygen and shifting climates, combined with the emergence of more evolutionarily advanced predators, created a double challenge for the giant invertebrates. The selection pressures favored smaller sizes for insects, as smaller bodies required less oxygen and could be sustained more efficiently. They also encouraged adaptations like faster reproductive cycles, better camouflage, or more specialized niches to avoid the new formidable predators. The age of the colossal insects gradually faded, their ecological dominance yielding to the burgeoning diversity of early reptiles. By the end of the Permian period, the once mighty Meganeura and Arthropleura were gone, leaving behind only their fossilized imprints as a testament to a bygone era. Their descendants, the insects and millipedes we know today, are fascinating and diverse, but none ever again attained the truly colossal dimensions of their Carboniferous ancestors. The world had changed, the atmosphere had thinned, and a new chapter in life's grand story had begun, paving the way for the age of reptiles and, eventually, the rise of mammals. The story of the Carboniferous giants is a powerful illustration of how intimately linked life is to the planet's atmospheric chemistry and the ceaseless march of evolution. The story of the Carboniferous giants, those colossal insects and arthropods that once roamed a steamy, oxygen-rich world, offers us a profound and enduring lesson. It is a powerful reminder of just how deeply environmental conditions can shape the evolution of life on Earth, orchestrating not just minor adjustments, but truly dramatic transformations in size, form, and ecological dominance. For millions of years, the very air these creatures breathed, the dense, humid forests they inhabited, and the geological processes that locked away carbon, all converged to create a unique planetary stage where invertebrates could achieve sizes that seem almost mythical to us today. While the age of colossal insects has long passed into the annals of deep time, their fossilized remains continue to speak to us across hundreds of millions of years. These ancient whispers, preserved as delicate wing imprints in shale, segmented body casts in sandstone, or even fossilized trackways winding across primeval mud, are far more than mere curiosities. They are invaluable pieces of a grand puzzle, informing our understanding of ancient ecosystems and providing direct evidence of Earth's ever-changing atmospheric chemistry. Imagine a paleontologist carefully chiseling away at a slab of rock, revealing the intricate venation of a Meganeura wing, perhaps 60 centimeters long, a testament to a creature that once zipped through the Carboniferous air. Or picture the discovery of an Arthropleura trackway, a series of parallel indentations in ancient sediment, indicating the slow, deliberate journey of a 2-meter-long millipede across a swampy forest floor, perhaps 310 million years ago. Each discovery is like finding a page from Earth's ancient diary, meticulously recording events from an unimaginably distant past. From these remarkable fossils, scientists piece together the environmental tapestry of the past. For instance, the sheer abundance of carbon locked away in vast coal seams, a direct legacy of the Carboniferous forests, provides a geochemical signature of an atmosphere dramatically different from our own. By studying the isotopic composition of carbon in these ancient deposits, and even analyzing the density of tiny pores called stomata on the leaves of fossilized plants, which vary with atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, researchers can indirectly reconstruct past oxygen concentrations. These complex analyses allow us to confidently state that the air of the Carboniferous period truly was a breath of fresh air for large arthropods, brimming with oxygen at levels that would be toxic to many modern creatures if sustained. The fossils are not just proof of giant insects, but also proof of the unique atmospheric conditions that fostered them. Modern scientific research continues to explore the intricate interplay of oxygen, temperature, and predation in determining animal size, revealing a far more complex web of factors than one might initially imagine. While the high oxygen hypothesis remains a cornerstone for explaining Carboniferous gigantism, it is by no means the only variable at play. Scientists today conduct fascinating experiments to test these ideas. For example, they might raise generations of fruit flies, common laboratory insects, in controlled atmospheric chambers with varying oxygen levels, mimicking conditions from ancient Earth. What they often observe is that in higher oxygen environments, these insects tend to grow larger, develop faster, and can even have more robust respiratory systems. This directly supports the idea that oxygen availability is a critical limiting factor for insect size in the modern world. However, temperature also plays a significant role. Insects are cold-blooded, meaning their internal body temperature is largely dictated by their surroundings. Higher temperatures generally lead to increased metabolic rates, which in turn demand more oxygen. There's a delicate balance. While more oxygen might allow for a larger body, a warmer body also needs more of that oxygen, and the efficiency of their tracheal system can be affected. Some research suggests that at very high temperatures, insects might actually need to reduce the size of their tracheal tubes to prevent excessive water loss, which could then limit their overall body size. This introduces a fascinating counterpoint. Perhaps the Carboniferous wasn't just about high oxygen, but also a specific range of warm, yet not excessively hot temperatures that allowed gigantism to flourish. The precise optimal temperature range for insect gigantism, especially in an oxygen-rich world, is still an active area of debate and investigation. Then, there is the crucial factor of predation and competition. The Carboniferous giants existed in a world where the dominant predators were often other large arthropods. But as we discussed, the end of their reign coincided with the rise of more efficient, lung-breathing vertebrates, the early reptiles. The evolutionary pressure exerted by these new, agile, and metabolically superior predators cannot be overstated. A colossal insect, while impressive, might also be a slower, more vulnerable target if its respiratory system is already strained by declining oxygen. In a world with fast-moving, actively hunting reptiles, smaller, more agile insects might have had a survival advantage, able to hide more effectively or escape more quickly. Thus, the arms race between predator and prey, a fundamental driver of evolution, likely contributed to the shrinking of insects, as being smaller and faster became more beneficial than being simply enormous. It becomes clear then that the story of insect gigantism and its eventual decline is not a simple tale with a single cause, but rather a complex symphony played by multiple environmental and biological instruments. Oxygen levels provided the fundamental physiological permission for large bodies. Temperature influenced metabolic rates and tracheal efficiency. And the emergence of new, more advanced predators introduced selective pressures that favored smaller, more efficient forms. Scientists continue to untangle these threads, using sophisticated models and experimental data to understand how these factors interacted across millions of years, shaping the life we see today. The ongoing debates, where different research groups emphasize different variables, are a healthy and vital part of the scientific process, pushing our understanding ever forward. Looking back at this extraordinary period helps us appreciate the truly dynamic nature of our planet and the incredible diversity of life it has supported and continues to support throughout its long history. Earth is not a static stage. It is a living, breathing entity, constantly undergoing geological, atmospheric, and climatic shifts. Each major change has ripple effects, opening new evolutionary pathways for some life forms, while closing them for others. The Carboniferous period reminds us that what seems like a fixed biological constraint today, the relatively small size of insects, was once a very different reality, dictated by a very different planetary environment. From the steaming ancient swamps where colossal millipedes lumbered, to the misty skies where dragonflies with wingspans like eagles soared, the age of giant insects offers a humbling perspective on life's adaptability and the profound power of Earth's systems. It teaches us that life is not just a passenger on this planet, but an active participant, constantly shaping and being shaped by its environment. The echoes of that ancient world resonate still, reminding us of the endless possibilities of evolution and the breathtaking story of life on Earth, a story that continues to unfold moment by moment across vast stretches of time.